It's my pleasure to introduce to you Demarre McGill. He is the flute professor at the University of Cincinnati College-Conservatory of Music. He is the principal flutist of the Seattle Symphony and has appeared with ensembles like the Dallas Symphony, the Metropolitan Opera Orchestra, where he was the principal flutist, and numerous other ensembles. He teaches at the Aspen Music Festival, and his career is so illustrious that he has very rare awards for classical musicians. The Infantry Career Grant goes to very few woodwind players. So we are very lucky to have him with us today. He has degrees from the Curtis Institute and the Juilliard School. And with that, I'll let you take it away.
Okay, you can hear me okay? Everything's good. Well, it's great to be here with you all. Um, I'm just looking forward to talking to you a little bit about things that have been an important part of my musical trajectory, and then leaving some time at the end, just to to take any questions that you may have. But I wanted to focus, at least initially, on beauty and the idea of beauty. And before I continue with this, I would like to really clarify what I mean by beauty. And that is something that it doesn't have to be pretty, actually. Beauty to me doesn't have to be pretty, but it does represent something that is as it relates to playing an instrument, that is done with care, and which is done with, you can even say, with love. Okay, but it doesn't mean that it has to be pretty, and this is really, really important to understand. So the reason why beauty is of the utmost importance to what I do as a musician is that it is my goal from the time that I open up a piece of music for the first time up until the time that I'm performing it. A lot of people, understandably so, immediately are focusing on, as soon as they put their instruments together, are focused on, the wonderful craft of playing the instrument. And then in turn, the wonderful craft of learning a piece of music. But unfortunately, this tends to be removed from what should be the ultimate goal, and that is to make music. So once again, before we go on, I would like to talk just briefly about this idea of music and of what we do. Classical musicians have to do something that a lot of people who are growing up singing don't have to do. Like when I was growing up in Chicago, I encountered so many like kids when I was younger who just happened to have a natural voice, who could sing without any training, right? We have to learn our instruments. But what happens almost immediately is that the path that we set out on ends up taking us further and further away from music making. And so by the time we basically know our way around the instrument, we are unaware that we are completely removed from music making. And so we have in our lives, if we happen to, especially if we happen to listen to non-classical music, we have the music that makes us remember someone. We have the music that makes us forget someone. We have the music that takes us to a time that we dreamt of going back to. We have the music that takes us to a time that we've never experienced. We have music that makes us cry. We have music that makes us stop crying. Or we have music and we love music that makes us want to dance. And we listen to music that makes us realize that we can't dance. All of these things become music, but what we actually do when we are putting together our instrument typically has nothing to do with those things, right? So my focus on beauty when I put together my instrument is to stay connected to that, in my opinion, the purest and the most beautiful, in quotes, sense of what music is to me. So, just to talk you through how I really apply this to my daily musical flute routine, is that I will start off with a tone exercise. Even while I'm doing a tone exercise, doing long tones, I'm in the same zone that you'll find me in if I'm performing. Exactly the same. My focus is exactly the same. I am doing the one thing that I'm constantly doing when I'm performing is no matter what is coming out of the instrument, I'm trying to make it better, trying to make it more beautiful. Um, so this is something I'm thinking about even with tone exercises. When we get to technical exercises, if I'm practicing scales, I'm understanding that I am practicing these scales not only to uh, to have more discipline, more control over my fingers, so that my body is doing exactly what I am telling it to do. My fingers are going down exactly when I want them to go down, and that's when metronome practice is very useful. Um, but when I'm practicing these scales or arpeggios or intervals, I'm also trying to play them in a way that isn't different from when I'm playing a piece of music. There is zero difference. Because if I don't treat it that way, what will happen is that if I'm really a really good student, and I mean this in a very general sense, constantly trying to improve, then I play my tone exercises, right? Just with not a lot of thought, just going through the motion, right? I play my scales. If I'm really good, I'm playing my scales with the metronome. I'm playing my arpeggios with the metronome. Then if I'm really good, I'm practicing etudes, just trying to get through them, trying to get through it without stopping from beginning to end. Then when I get to a piece of music, my goal is just to learn the music, just to learn like technically learn the music. So when am I actually in, injecting in what I'm doing the things that make music so amazing when I'm not playing the flute? The things that make me dream, the things that make me feel or forget or, remember. Never doing these things. So we're playing our pieces with the same enthusiasm or lack of enthusiasm that we're using when we're playing our exercises. And this is how we actually get so removed from the ability that we all have as artists to do something amazing, like make someone's day. This is stuff that we just don't think about when we're playing our instrument. So this is as I mentioned, I am focused on this when I'm doing exercises. When I get to etudes, and I would highly suggest all of you who are instrumentalists focus maybe a little bit more than you're doing now. Um, not to make assumptions, but a lot of people really don't really understand the benefit of practicing an etude. Why practice an etude if you're going to practice scales and the repertoire, the pieces of music? Well, I will tell you why. It's because even more than exercises, etudes will teach you how to make music. Even the most tedious, the most repetitive, in quotes, technical etude is not only teaching you some specific technical discipline that you need to focus on as a flutist or as a violinist or clarinetist. Um, but it's also an opportunity to learn how to phrase, because if you can make any etude sound beautiful, if you can bring an etude to the point where you can proudly present this at a performance, even the most repetitive, the most tedious, boring etude, if you can bring that etude to life, then if you're a flutist and you're playing like Chaminade Concertino, or if you're, a clarinetist playing like Weber Concertino, um, that is super easy to make sense of after you've made sense of a work that is just simply a series of scales and intervals. Um, so Okay, so my focus when I go to etudes, obviously, you're getting the point now. Speaking of being repetitive, is that it's on music making, and I want to make another thing very clear: is that I am not neglecting the the technical part of learning something. I also have to, like, if I have I have a stand, a stand full of music I need to learn here, right? I also need to learn the notes. But what happens when I am focusing on, if I open this music here? This is a sonata by a friend of mine that I'm relearning. He wrote this for me when I was 17. I'm relearning. So I'll open the music. Immediately, I am actually not thinking about learning the notes at all. I'm practicing slowly, and I am trying to play this music as beautifully as possible. Like literally every note, just in slow motion. Focus on the quality of sound, focusing on where I think the destination notes are. Where is this phrase going? Okay. That is what I'm thinking of. If I practice like that careful, slow, beautiful practice, I will automatically learn the notes, obviously, because you can't separate that. If I have, and there's in this particular piece, there's some very difficult passages, um, very difficult 16th note passages that go on and on and on. I'm practicing those the same way, slowly, methodically, beautifully, right? By doing that, I am inevitably learning the notes, like really internalizing the technique, while also learning how I am going to present this to you when I perform this to you. If you're not thinking like this and you're just thinking, oh, this is such an awkward passage, if you practice long enough, you will be able to play it. Okay? But then you've spent all of these hours learning, internalizing, ingraining not like a musicless way of playing into your spirit, into your heart, into your mind. And it's going to take an equal number of hours for you to undo that, and then to train yourself to play beautifully. So that is reason enough to, as soon as you open a piece of music, focus on the quality of sound, focus on the direction of phrase, focus even more importantly on how you feel when you play it and how you want the listener to feel. Okay? I promise you that as soon as you start to do that, you start to create what I would call an atmosphere of perfection when you play. Okay? And this is a musical, like a sonic environment that you're creating when you play that actually makes it okay to mess up. It does, because you allow the listener to actually enjoy what you're doing as opposed to checking off boxes when you do something wrong. So this is the reason why any audition that I've won for, I mean, a competition or as a professional for like an orchestra, any audition that I've been lucky enough to win has been a demonstration of of imperfection. I have never ever played an audition that allowed me to have some sort of success that was anywhere close to perfect. And I can promise you that there was a person or there were people at the audition who were less lucky that played perfectly. This is a very important thing to embrace, this idea that there is something bigger than perfection, at least perfection in the way that we think about it. And that one thing that is bigger than perfection is that if I'm listening to you and I can feel your commitment, your to really making every note you do mean something. If I can feel that you've put in that time, then if you do that, you're not going to be messing up all over the place, right? But you're only human. This note may squeak, you may miss an accidental or something, but you've pulled me into this beautiful sonic world that you're creating. And when something happens to go wrong, I just simply want you to get back on track. And I'm grateful that you took me to that place, way more grateful than the person that was simply caught up in playing all of the right notes with no consideration that this music actually may mean something to me, the listener. So, in a nutshell, that's basically the thing that I like to apply to my practice from the very start. I can add a couple of things. I like to add a couple of other things. Is that from listening to me speak like this, it could be easy to think that my mind is just on, the fantasy, the storytelling part of what I do, or just, that, or just the specifics of making every single note beautiful. But I want to share with you another kind of mantra of mine. Is that discipline without spirit meaning energy. Discipline without spirit, for me, is pointless. And spirit without discipline, to me, is reckless. Okay? You need both. So another thing I would really encourage all of you to do is to, as much as I want you to pay attention to beauty, I mentioned earlier about how I practice slowly. And all of you, I know, have heard, you practice slowly, especially when you can't play it quickly, right? But what almost always happens when I ask someone to play what they're doing at a slower tempo, they'll do so, but they'll play the music exactly as they played it quickly. And that is usually musicless. Like, just when you're playing fast, you're just, it's like a machine. So when you play it slowly, you play it like a machine. It's not even a secret, but not that many people do it, is that when you practice slowly, I need for you to understand that you need to play in a way that is performance ready when you're practicing slowly, because I would encourage you to play quickly exactly how you play slowly and not the other way around. So you can take, let's see. Okay. One second. I don't know if I have this set up to hear my flute properly, but I'll try. You can play something like, can you hear me okay? Okay. Something like what? Let me. Um, um, that is a definitely a slower version of the Iberic Concerto. Go something like that, right? The way I would practice that is literally like this. I am just focusing on the sound. I'm focusing on each note, with the goal being that when I play it, when I speed up the metronome, when I speed up the tempo, I am actually not trying to drop what I just practiced. I actually, when I'm speeding up the tempo, try to play it even more beautifully, even more expressively. So the faster I play it, the more expressively I will play it. So by the time I'm playing it at tempo, the listener won't really know why it sounds so easy. You know? It's because I've learned how to phrase even the most technical of passages. You know, I've learned to treat all technical passages as melodic passages and not technical ones. So that means that when I'm playing it quickly, it is not going to sound hard because I'm not thinking of it as a technical passage. Let me try to give you another example. Let me think. Let's see. Okay. So, here's a famous example, you know. You know, Peter and the Wolf, the bird from Peter the Wolf, Peter and the Wolf. This is something that, you know, it stresses out a lot of flutists. It's quarter note, I believe, equals 176, which is super fast. And everybody is trying their best to get it to that tempo. You know, for good reason. It's, you know, maybe it's not that easy. But when you slow it down, you start to actually hear, I mean, you can say it, and I hope you understand what I mean by this. If this is a bird, you start to see the face of the bird. You start to actually hear the personality of the bird. So the way I hear this is, I have this G natural, T-hum, bum, and then immediately we have these G sharps. And so the way my mind works, we have T-hum, bum, this A to the G natural, and then Tian, tum, tum, tum. When you're playing it slowly, you realize how annoying these G sharps are compared to the G natural. So I start to think to myself, okay, this bird is a little annoying. Not only is he playing a G sharp, he's singing this G sharp right after the G natural, but he's repeating it. Okay, so he's an annoying bird. And then I get to, to me, I hear that. I'm like, okay, that sounds pretty sweet. I think everyone would agree that that sounds sweet. I think everyone will agree that those G sharps sound annoying. So if you're thinking about music like this, if you're discovering the real soul of the music from this kind of practice, and then you apply it to when you're playing actually fast, when I'm playing it quickly, if you're able to convey this at a fast tempo, then you can understand why, although in the music it says quarter note equals 176, that you can have a person that goes one step further and plays it perfectly, quarter note equals 177, perfectly. And it's still not good enough if you have a person that's playing it quarter note equals 168, but bringing out the character of this bird, if that makes any sense at all. This is, honestly, I would call this a high level conversation. And it may be strange to think about music this way and to think about how you can start to hear music this way. But I think it's important for you all to hear this kind of talk because you will start to look for these things in the music that you play. If you pair that with what I believe, for me, is a fact, that there is no technical music, there's only melodic. No matter how hard it is, there's always, if you slow it down, it's melodic. It's just fast melodies, if you think about it that way. And also, there's always disclaimers. So there can be exceptions to the rules, of course, but one major disclaimer, and I think this is really important to understand as well, and I hope you really understand what I mean by this, is that sometimes what's more important than sometimes, and I even as a teacher, I hate to say this, but sometimes what's more important than following the rules is understanding why they exist while you're following them, hopefully, but really understanding why they exist. I'll try to give you an example of this. Okay, I hear quite often, like if I ask a student, you need to play out here. I mean, I'm not hearing you, and they can say, well, Professor McGill, I mean, it's marked piano. I'm like, okay, well, yes, it is marked piano, but perhaps 2 measures later, you have triple P. You understand? So that is an example of where it's important to, for instance, understand context as opposed to just simply seeing piano and playing soft and not leaving yourself enough room for the pianissimo or for the triple piano a few measures later. This is actually, I would also say, extremely important, because as soon as you start thinking like this, as soon as you start to put your decision making into the context of the entire work, then you're increasing the likelihood of understanding whatever story this composer is trying to tell via the GPS markings that he's leaving for you, via articulation indications, tempo indications, dynamic markings. Once again, I have to admit that I would really call this complicated talk. But if we put it under the umbrella of connecting what we do as instrumentalists to being the creators of the music that we actually feel as music, the music, once again, that has the power to, make some lady's day because she decided to buy a ticket to hear you play, a concert after she spent 2 months taking care of her sick grandmother. This is the power that all of you have. And as soon as you start to think of music in this sort of detailed way, accepting the responsibility that you have, I believe, as creative types, as artists, then actually forget about what the audience thinks. You start to feel good about what you're doing. You start to play in a way that is pleasing to you. And just to throw out one other thing, is there's another thing that another sort of mantra of mine is that it's absolutely necessary to be able to give yourself chills, to give yourself goosebumps when you play. You need to pair that with, I know a lot of you, I'm sure, most of us are pretty often not so satisfied with what we're producing, right? Which is very helpful because we have to be our best teacher. We have to use the same ears that we easily critique other people with. We have to use those ears for ourselves. But I would strongly encourage you to understand that you can do both. You can be creating a sound via your instrument that is at once pleasing to you, but also necessarily so subject to your criticism. It can always be better. But I would say that one of the most important things that I have to tell you today is to be able to give yourself chills when you play. Try to have that as a goal. Once you get used to that, it's an amazing gauge because I promise you when I'm playing and I am inspiring a reaction within me based on something that I'm creating, it really increases the likelihood that you're having a similar reaction to it. Even if the story that you're hearing from my playing is different from the story that I'm envisioning. Okay, so, I talked about a variety of things. I tried to keep it under the umbrella of beauty, but more importantly, these are, I'm not sure how much of it made sense with my rambling, but if I had any secrets to what I've been able to do to carve out a pretty satisfying life in music, it's because of these things that I've shared with you. So I'm tired of hearing myself talk. I want to hear you talk. I want to know a little bit about you. So let me see. How can I see you guys? How many are in the room? About
11 or so.
11 or so.
We have a mic up front, and when people want to ask questions or chat, they come up and stand in front of the mic because it is a directional microphone meant only for the teaching podium.
I see. Okay. Well, you know what? Then I would love to hear some questions. Questions. People underestimate questions. These questions, by the way, you asking a question is much more important for you than my answer to the question. I can already tell you that. If you can come up with a question, then you can, even if you don't have anything to say, then you would be a good teacher. Really. So let's hear questions.
Sure.
two questions. First, what model is your flute?
Motto is my flute. It's a 14 karat rose gold Powell flute. I played Powell flutes my entire adult life for sure. Well, actually, even more longer than that. I started playing Powell flutes when I was 17, and I played them since.
Okay, so here's my question. How do you balance I loved that what you said that there is no technical music, only melodic. So how do you find that balance between making the music while you're practicing and adding the technical, or does it just come naturally from?
That's no, it doesn't come naturally. This is maybe I misunderstood what you meant by comes naturally. I don't separate the two at all. I will once again, I'll take out my flute again. Um, like I am a strong believer in metronome practice. The metronome is on pretty often, but if I have, you know, if I'm practicing, these thirds, I mean, you have a choice. You can think of it as a technical exercise, um, or you can think of it as a melodic exercise. It doesn't really. It changes how I look at the exercise. This expression you may have heard. If you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. And I find that if I thought of that as a technical exercise, I will be able to play it. But it disconnects me from the place that I need to be when I'm trying to play this etude beautifully and then in turn play this repertoire beautifully. So I simply just stay in melodic zone. So the other thing, the really important reason why I do that is because even if I'm playing it at a slow tempo, I am learning the technique. Especially if I'm playing at that slow tempo with a metronome, and if I'm playing with the metronome with the subdivision on, my fingers are going down where they need to go down. So that is already happening. You understand? What is not automatic, though, is my intention. My intention to focus on the quality of sound, to focus on like literally playing it beautifully is not automatic. Learning the technique is, as long as I'm practicing with a metronome and being very disciplined about that work, that is going to happen. So I don't separate the two.
Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Who else has a question?
Hi.
Hello.
So I had a question, like, how do you decide when to speed stuff up? That might sound like a silly question, but like, you talked about practicing with intention. So when do you decide, like, that you've done it well enough at the slower tempo to bump it up, I guess?
Right. That's an excellent question. Um, and it's a very personal question. When you're able to play it as well as you're playing it at the slower tempo, at the slightly faster tempo, then you're ready for that slightly faster tempo. So you have to try. Your goal is to eventually play it faster. So um, you want to test yourself. Another thing you can do is you can give yourself a time limit. For instance, you can practice it at this tempo for this amount of time for this day. Um, you can then bump it up one click for the next day. Or if that's too easy, you can do 2 clicks. You have to find this balance. The one thing that really helps you be a good gauge of when it's time to move on is simply when you really feel comfortable with it. Also, I mean, but it's important to really understand what the goal is. The goal is for you to internalize what you're doing, I believe. You know, that's I'm a strong believer in that you really have to be careful, be very careful with the words that you choose in general, but the words that you choose for yourself when you're talking to yourself. So if you say, okay, my goal is to play this perfectly, I would recommend against it. I would say your goal is to feel comfortable with this. You understand? Because if you use a word, if you say my goal is to play this perfectly, then it's like it's easy to not accomplish that goal. You know, if your goal is to be comfortable, then it actually will imply that you're going to be playing it pretty perfectly. You know, and so then when you speed up the metronome, what I try to do when I speed up the metronome, I'm trying to make sure that I am in the same state of mind, playing it exactly the same way. And this is it's a human thing for me. I can give you another example when it comes to learning languages. Like, I think it's probably easier to learn another language if you are providing some sort of emotional context to the words that you're learning. So instead of memorizing a list of 100 words, if you are, putting it in the context, like I've read a book on learning languages, that suggests, it's so much better and more efficient to look at pictures when you're learning languages. So you can look at a picture if you're learning whatever language, German, Russian, whatever. And this is actually in a book that I saw. There was a picture of the Earth. There's a picture of like an alien or a being on the Earth, and this being was looking up at the sky, and you see one white bright star. So when you're looking at this picture, you're learning, and you see the words, you're learning in that language the word for earth, for like human being, for person, you're learning the word for one, you're learning the word for white, you're learning the word for star. And so you're connecting it to this picture. You have a high likelihood of remembering those words because you're associating it to something. This is what I do when I'm learning music. I'm trying to, even when I'm playing an exercise, I'm paying attention to being comfortable, to how I'm feeling, and I try to replicate that as I speed up the tempo. I talked a lot. I hope somewhere in there was the answer to your question.
That's a lot. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Other questions?
Hi, my name is Simon. The question I had is kind of broad, but where did you get your inspiration for music? Like, what were some of the artists that you listened to and that inspired you to become the flute player that you are?
Great question. Great question. Well, uh, I'll try to list a few, but there's been so many. It's like inspiration is. It's funny. Like inspiration. Let me just talk briefly about inspiration. It's so funny. I think sometimes it can be overrated. I'll give you an example. During like the past, especially at the beginning of the pandemic, I had a lot of students that were really it was difficult to find inspiration. And and it was for me as well. what I encourage them to do is to, if they're not feeling inspired, then you want to sit on the couch and watch TV, sit in the couch and watch TV. What's real, there's nothing wrong with that. What's more important though is to know when to get off the couch. You don't need inspiration for that. You just need to get off the couch. You don't need inspiration to put together your instrument. You don't need inspiration to just play. Even if it's 15 minutes, 10 minutes. You do that, you put it away, you sit back on the couch. The next day, you do it again. Maybe up it by 5 minutes. The next day, you do it again. Eventually, if you keep on doing this, you're going to sound better. And then when you start to improve, you're inspired again. You understand? But for me, growing up, my first inspiration was James Galway. I mean, it was just, I heard this recording. I had a cassette tape of his and I played it. I was like, what is this? You know, he was double tonguing and, you know, and it sounds like two flutes and it blew my mind. But I also, that same time, my inspiration was this piece that I was learning, Minuet and Dance of the Blessed Spirit by Gluck. I just happened to fall in love with that. I've had a lot of inspiration from people in music outside of the genre, definitely. I like to watch, you know, anyone who has done well in their field. I like to hear them. I like to hear them talk. It's like one example is this. For instance, at CCM, my school, like every couple of weeks we'll have a guest, and that's one benefit of having a lot of things online these days. And I told them at the beginning of the academic year that we're going to have a lot of guests, and they're all going to be so different instrumentalists, maybe non-instrumentalists. We're going to have a lot of guests. But if you really are listening, at the end of the year, even though they're so different, there will be one or two things that they all possess. And I don't know what that will be. But if you pay attention, I like listening to people talk about their path. You know? I get inspiration from that because there's something they have in common to another person who has found their own path. Other people, my teacher in college, Julius Baker, I've had friends that were inspiring. Honestly, I'm going to just stop there. The more places and people you can find inspiration, you can be inspired by and find inspiration from, the better you will grow. Basically, try to be a sponge and recognize that you can learn from anyone. If I'm playing, and I know we have a minute left, but when I'm preparing for an audition, I will play for anybody. Anybody that will listen to me, I want to play for them and I want to hear what they have to say. If you can be like that, then there's a lot of people in this world to learn from. It's a good question.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks so much for your time. We very much appreciate it. It's been a real pleasure.
Yeah. Can I just have one favor? Can the students just turn around and wave? I just want to see some faces.
Everyone, you got to get on game.
That made my day. Thank you very much. Thank you for having me, you all. Thank you.